Hey everyone, welcome to Odie and Chill Live. This is a big moment for us. This is episode 150. I am Paul, I'm the group CEO of Overdose, and I am so pumped to have Connor from Tracksuit. Connor is the co-founder and co-CEO of Tracksuit, and he's got a fantastic story about what he's been doing, how he got here, and what Tracksuit's up to as well. So Connor, thank you so much for coming on board. And yeah, I can't wait to have this chat with you.
Oh man, thanks for having me. My first live podcast, baby's first live podcast. Who knew? No, stoked to be here. And yeah, Overdose is aspirational, B2B brand, super cool. So stoked to be here.
Awesome. So hey, let's kick it off and let's try and get to know Connor a little bit better. You have described yourself to me, and I've seen you talk about it in other places, as a self-professed SaaS nerd. And I know you've got a really interesting background, and you didn't start out in this space. So do you want to give us just like the short history of Connor's journey to today?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, self-professed SaaS nerd. I'd say that's true. And I started my career as a corporate lawyer of all things, so very much not SaaS. And maybe that's where my love for SaaS comes from, and that, when you're charging like 6-minute blocks and every day is like a new set of charging, the business model of SaaS is very appealing relative to professional services. So probably a lot of that hard graft of professional services is what helped create some love for the SaaS business model. But yeah, I started my career as a corporate lawyer, and then I worked with the Ice House to launch, which is a DC here in Auckland, to launch our first accelerator program called Lightning Lab here in Auckland. And that was I was like, I want to get into startups, but I didn't know how or what that meant. So we raised a small fund and put a couple cohorts through an accelerator program, which was accelerated my learning in startups as well. And that was longer ago than I care to admit. So, startups was like a new thing in Auckland then. And then I jumped into one of the startups as an operator, sweep the floors generalist. That was called Mish Guru. Awesome product. We were a Snapchat third-party app content management product, and we scaled globally. Opened offices in Sydney, Berlin, New York, and that took me to New York, where we built like a sales and marketing team, and we worked with McDonald's, Paramount Pictures to manage their Snapchat accounts, and it was an absolute blast. Love that team. It's where I met Matt, my co-founder now of Tracksuit, and yeah, that went really, really well when Snapchat had product market fit, and then it sort of was a brutal loss of product market fit when Snapchat slowed down a little bit and Instagram took over. So we learned a lot, and we kind of pivoted and tried a whole bunch of things, and yeah, it ended up exiting fairly recently, actually. So a good result for Tom and the team. But yeah, and then I stayed in New York. I loved New York and was like a fractional COO for other companies landing and expanding in the States out of New Zealand and Australia. And then COVID hit. My wife and I had our first daughter on the way. And so we kind of escaped New York back to New Zealand. And Tracksuit was kind of born within the same few months as our first daughter. And then it's grown over the last 2.5 years.
Wow. For my sins, I spent quite a lot of time in the advertising industry, almost 20 years. And I remember when Mish Guru kind of came into the agencies that I was in, and it was just such a forward-thinking way to interact with a platform that had kind of not really hit that kind of corporate world. So such an interesting story, and to kind of run with it and see that growth was pretty amazing. As a blueprint, then I guess your time moving from kind of the suit and tie and getting changed into the trainers and denim. What I guess if you look at kind of the success that you had with Lightning Lab starting up way back when, right, when VC and kind of that funding space was so new and so so fresh and really unknown, particularly in the New Zealand space, and across APAC. I guess, taking that concept of something new that wasn't really understood or tried and tested in market, how has that informed what you're doing now?
Yeah, I guess I mean I think for me I was probably always like that, had that startup-y, love building new things mindset. The When I became a lawyer, it probably drilled into me a bit more of the like operational side, the details, side of my brain. Because you can't really make mistakes when you're dealing with M&A transactions at a big
A
firm.
little bit of discipline,
Um,
right? A little bit of
yeah,
discipline.
yeah. Little bit as much, but I didn't last. So, kind of learned too much. But no, so I think like I learned so much as a lawyer through like having that details mindset drilled into me. But I think I was always an entrepreneur at heart. And so, yeah, my brain just naturally goes to solving problems with new and novel, whether it's technology or just ways of thinking about it from a first principles standpoint. Yeah, I enjoy that, like just that feeling of looking at a problem and trying to solve it through fresh thinking, I guess. And I'm also like not, a tech founder, so I'm not really sitting on that technology side. I'm much more of like a business validation, and I only believe in validation if it's actually like creating money, like creating some monetary validation, because a lot of people will tell you that they like your idea, they think that's a good solution, but it doesn't, if there's no follow through, it's very hard to judge what's real demand and what's not.
And I guess, in that startup space, right? There's two thoughts here. One is startups are often solving one of two sorts of problems. One is an existing problem that isn't solved well, and another one is a new problem that hasn't been, hasn't been really socialized that well, right? So, like Mishguru was looking at a platform and going, "There's something here. We should go after it, and we should build something that's really usable and distributable." Whereas I think from your perspective on Tracksuit, right, this is a problem that's existed for a long time that just hasn't been served very well at the space that you're playing in as well. How do you look at, from that kind of startup environment, that accelerator program environment? How do you help startups, I guess, validate a problem that hasn't been identified as a big problem, right? You're creating a new product in a new
Mm.
environment. You've got to educate a market around that versus a product that's coming out that is just, you know, being quite niche and really tackling something that is existing that hasn't been done well. How are you helping them go through that validation process?
I mean, I'm trying to remember my Lightning Lab days, but what has persisted with me through the learnings in Lightning Lab, and then has kind of helped us find product market fit with Tracksuit, is definitely just believing in having tons of conversations, like
Mm.
and slowly iterating, like every conversation slowly iterating towards the marketing and messaging and product that actually suits the needs of an ICP and ideal customer profile. So, we always talked back in Lightning Lab days, when you're just launching an idea, that you want to find like 1 to 5 people who just absolutely couldn't continue living without that solution. You don't have to think about your total addressable market being hundreds of millions or billions of dollars at that stage. It's like, just find like 1 to 5 people who just crave this and won't stop talking about it as soon as you bring it up. And though, if there's 1 to 5 people that you can find within 500 conversations, then there's probably enough of a market to get to like $1 million ARR, annual recurring revenue, or 2 or 3 or 10. And then from there, you kind of can rethink about product market fit and expand your product, or go after a larger market segment. But if you go after that larger market segment from day one, you're going to be just throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. If you find 1 to 5 people who are just absolutely in love with it, then that gives you a really good leg to kind of find the next 1 to 5 and the next and the next, and you just build from there. So yeah, I think you often see people discount business ideas because they don't think it works for enough people, or maybe the market isn't big enough. But I would almost go the other way and say, oh, that's a great place to start, because if you can build something that's perfect for those 10 or those 5, you're just like, you're on your way to building something for hundreds.
Yeah, it's such an interesting concept, right? Like, you see so many kind of pitch decks and presentation decks out there that paint that massive picture, right? The size of opportunity is huge. We only get a little bit of, the corner of this, and we're just relevant, and we're running away with it, right? But that concept of you just need one, and then the next one, and then the next one, that next customer to validate it. I've heard you mention kind of that old school kind of venture decks, the 5 slide deck that looks wonderful and beautiful, and people just love, they buy the deck almost, right? And I know, through your journey of kind of building, validating, and then growing Tracksuit, that concept of validation's been, at the heart of the success of what you've been doing. Do you want to talk a little bit about, how you've evolved into, getting the concept of Tracksuit up and running, the partnerships you've got there to really make it relevant and real, and really authentic in terms of what you're trying to build, and then how you've gone on to take it on that journey that you've been on?
Yeah, totally. And maybe I realize I haven't actually said what Tracksuit is. So for anyone who doesn't know what Tracksuit is, we are beautiful, affordable, always on brand tracking, which means that we do tens of thousands and increasingly more towards millions of consumer surveys to find out what actual humans think and feel about brands. We track almost 5,000 brands globally now, and we're live in New Zealand, Australia, US, UK, and Canada. So that's Tracksuit. And yeah, when we started, we essentially had this very high level problem, which was it was kind of upsetting to us that these new modern brands that had launched in the last 10 years and had grown really, really quickly, like the coolest brands in the world, like Allbirds or Warby Parker in the US, and they grow really quickly, but then that growth doesn't kind of keep going. And you look at like a Coca-Cola, L'Oreal, and they sort of grow at 3% to 5% every year. And these new modern brands like have this kind of much more difficult path of growing very quickly, and then that growth stagnating. And that's usually around when they stop raising money. And we were like just really curious about that. And we worked with James Herman from Previously Unavailable, who's a world recognized brand strategist, and brilliant folks at TRA, which is a market research company here in New Zealand. And with sort of like me and Matt's SaaS nerdiness, software as a service nerdiness, and their brand and market research nerdiness, with all of that good stuff combined, we kind of came up with this hypothesis that if you believe what gets measured gets managed, a lot of these companies hadn't been measuring top of funnel. They'd been like kind of over indexing on just focusing on ROAS and pumping like the digital channels, and putting $1 into the Facebook, Google slot machine and getting $3 back. And that's an awesome way to build a business, but it's become harder and more competitive over the last 5 years. And so now sometimes you're putting $1 in and you're getting 85 cents back, and you'd see it's like, oh shit, we can't really, shoot, I don't know if I can say that, but we can't really do that anymore. And so our hypothesis was that, can you build a tool that allows them to pay attention to the top of funnel, awareness, consideration, brand sentiment. And if they're paying attention to that, then that sort of flows down over time, and you can grow sustainably long term. So that was like where we started. And on that validation piece, your question, we came up with this little like mock-up of what brand tracking for a growth company might look like, and just believe in the 100 conversations rule. Go have 100 conversations, and by the 68th conversation, 11 people had signed up for this SaaS product that didn't even really exist. We were like, oh wow, these people really, really want this thing. And we said, if you sign up, we'll build it. It'll take a month or two. If we can't build it, you'll get your money back. But these people were willing to jump in because they were so passionate about this problem. And yeah, we built it in a couple of months, and we grew kind of really quickly, and kept building what the customers were asking for, which was, kind of if you have customers before you have a product, it's kind of an interesting way to build. And so that was that.
It's almost perfect, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and it also allowed us to bootstrap. Like, we have a lot of scar tissue from earlier startups that we've been in, where Matt and I call it VC validation, where it's easier to raise VC money than it is customer revenue. Like you can, especially if you've been in the game for a little bit, and as long as I have this receding hairline, you just like, the VCs, if you have an idea, they might fund it to give you a shot, and you end up building the thing that you put in your slide pack for the VCs, which no one has actually asked for. It's just a pretty picture of what you think is good. So building something that customers were asking for, iterating on it every single month, allowed us to kind of keep growing and bootstrapping, and sort of iterating on it regularly, and that's helped us create the momentum that we're seeing now, launching into the US and UK and Australia. And maybe the final thing. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to ask one question. So you talked about kind of the relevance of tracking brand awareness, making sure that, that true top of funnel is really, the importance of it and the value of it is being measured, right? And you can't manage what you can't measure mentality. I love that type of thing. How much has timing really played into the success of this launch, right? Because I agree 100%, right? The slot machine mentality was such a drug for so long, right? Because you could literally track that, return on ad spend, return on investment type mentality. But then the law of change, and the necessity to protect people's privacy and all that sort of stuff, and some of those platform changes that were coming through from iOS, and I mean, we've seen Facebook in courts around kind of this sort of stuff historically. So that move away from that detailed kind of personal tracking stuff, which almost became a really dirty word, to that understanding that the funnel isn't kind of just the bottom part, right? It's actually kind of the whole thing, and making sure you're pouring in the top value so that you can bring out the bottom kind of more refined and more specific kind of longer term benefits for the brand. How much was timing part of the decision making around this?
Oh, I mean, I think we were lucky with the timing. Like, this was a problem that we saw and we wanted to solve. If we tried to do it 10 years ago, people would have told us to go away because you could still use the slot machine, and they would have been like, no, it doesn't matter. But the cookie apocalypse, as people call it, has the timing of that has meant there's this wave of kind of marketers and C-suite and boards thinking like, well, wow, how do you create lifetime value? How do you create loyalty? How do you get into the consideration set? And they're starting to look at, this is old school marketing science. Like it's been around since the Mad Men era of marketing, and it was just sort of forgotten for a period because you could build $1 billion business just through digital means, and just through kind of connecting with people when they're ready to buy. But yeah, that's no longer the case. So there's this like wave going back towards brand and brand sentiment, and I think the timing of launching Tracksuit, we probably that wave helped us identify the problem. I don't know that we're smart enough to be like, we're doing this now because we see this wave happening. I think we've benefited from the wave.
Now's the time.
But I would love to claim that, but I don't think so. I think people, the whole like marketers are now again remembering that they have two jobs to do. I mean, marketers have probably always known this. It's more that this rest of the company is now accepting that there are these two jobs to do. 95% of people aren't ready to buy right now, and you have to market to them. You don't need to tell them prices. You don't need to tell them features. You need to tell them how, your brand lives and how your brand helps them feel better and have better
Absolutely.
connection to their family. And then the 5% who are ready to buy, you absolutely tell them the features and get them to click on the coupon and get them to buy. But there are two jobs to do, and you have to use different content and messages for each job. And yeah, Tracksuit sort of exists to help measure, how your marketing is landing with that 95% who aren't ready to buy right now.
Yeah, it's so interesting you talk about those two jobs, right? So I look at kind of the experiences that I've had with CMOs and different brands, everyone from kind of McDonald's to pure digital startups, right? And you see that it's almost generational transformation from a marketing standpoint. Back in the day, you could spend multi-millions of dollars on a TV ad, right? And you could justify it to any board because everyone believed in the kind of concept of selling a dream, selling a story, right? Selling this kind of brand concept and people bought into that idea. And then all of a sudden everything changed, right? Like I remember when Facebook came on board and everyone was like, how can I get my video onto my TV ad onto Facebook type thing? Now we're going, how can I make sure my TikTok, video gets up into, all these other channels, right? So it's kind of, the tail wagging the dog sometimes. Tracksuit particularly focuses on kind of more kind of early stage or growth companies. So typically these are companies that have grown up in the digital age, right? And they really understand the power of digital channels to really affect this kind of one-to-one behavior. Are you finding, and because of the cookie shift, are you finding these brands need a little bit of help to understand the value of brand, like the value of of creative and effectiveness and brand and messaging and stuff? Or do you already see that shift because of the ineffectiveness of some of the kind of old, the digital marketing channels that are out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we see, the people that are just like attracted to Tracksuit, understand it straight away. These almost like classically trained marketers. They might have worked at a bigger outfit for the last 5 years, like a large conglomerate or something. P&G, Unilever, Anheuser-Busch. They work somewhere that they have brand tracking every single month of their marketing life. And then they go and join, an up and coming growth business and help sort of mature that marketing team. And the first thing they ask for is like the brand tracking. They'll say, well, how do I need some brand tracking in order to know where to go, where the leak is in the funnel. And then it doesn't exist. And then they sort of are looking for a tool that matches the budget that they have and also the kind of digital experience the rest of that team is used to. They're used to living in Google Analytics. They're used to living in all of these new modern tools. And if you hand them a 100-page slide pack with a bunch of metrics that they don't understand, they're not really going to believe in it. So a lot of the success we've seen is just by making it more communicable and by making it more, simplifying it to make it easy for the entire organization to understand how awareness fits into their business goals. And that's been a lot of the success. So it's actually simplifying what, a lot of those people get at larger organizations, and making it easy to communicate to the founders or the C-suite, who maybe historically haven't had much to do with brand tracking.
And it's such an interesting conversation to have, right? Because often, if you're really relying on those digital metrics from GA and you're washing them against your channel performance and that sort of stuff, it's almost like that instant gratification piece versus that longer term view of the impact that you can have as you evolve, messaging and kind of content and, kind of that almost, it almost feels a little bit kind of, selfish really for a brand to concentrate on itself, but for an effect because you can see it over time that the more that brands are evolving the way they're talking and they're more relevant for their customer at this level, the better the performance day to day is at that bottom level as well. I do have a question about the brand name Tracksuits. Where did that come from? And did you turn up to your first pitch in matching tracksuits?
Yeah, tracksuit. I mean, that's from the brilliant mind of James Herman. He's named some of the coolest companies in New Zealand, and I think we had a few different names that we played with at the start, but tracksuit matched our personalities the most. You know, we're built for speed and for comfort. we, we're kind of play hard. You know, we just like the vibe, and you know, we're sort of a lot of the things we do are intentionally quite the opposite of what an old school market research firm might do. And so calling yourself something like Tracksuit, and yeah, showing up to my first investor pitch in front of like 1,100 people in a bright purple tracksuit was definitely something that stood out. I got called the Teletubby of the New Zealand startup scene in a spin-off article, which you know, career highlight, absolutely. So yeah,
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
that's our vibe, and it sort of yeah, matches how we show up in the world. And when you walk into our office, there's like a whole row of brightly colored tracksuits. You can pick one off the rack, and yeah, we're stoked with it, and it definitely matches our personalities.
Yeah, anyone who knows me knows that I'm a huge fan of outrageous matching tracksuits. So yeah, congratulations on that. And you know, I'd say you know in the startup space, right, almost any PR is good PR, right? So you know the Teletubby
I,
kind of comment, right? It's mentionable. I love that kind of we're built for speed and built for comfort concept as well. And you know, I guess that really goes back to you know living what you preach, right? Like the brand personality and what this stuff has to match, right? It has to feel something. You have to, you know, you almost have to own kind of that whole persona all the time type thing. And I guess so. You know how the time that Tracksuit's been in existence, right? What are the things that you've learnt over that time that you would have maybe done differently, or has really informed kind of the way that you've launched, right? Because I mean, you're attacking kind of massive markets now, like the US and the UK, and you know that's a gateway to Europe and stuff like that. What's that journey been like to take a product, get it validated, and then go, actually, this is globally relevant now. We have to do this.
Yeah, I mean, things we've learned. We're still only 2.5 years old, so I think we're like breaking things every month. Yesterday we had our kind of leadership team meeting, and yeah, the main discussion point was like, wow, we have broken everything. We need to rethink the entire way this company operates so that we can sort of grow from where we're at now to the end of the year. So just like, I guess, not letting anything linger for too long. It's probably like we probably should have had that meeting end of November. I'd say it's been broken for 2 months, and just like you should jump on these things probably even faster than we are doing. And yeah, when you get comfortable, you just like can run off track a little bit. So you know, nothing dire, but you just like if teams aren't communicating as they're growing, you know,
Mm,
it's no good for anyone. So so that's something that we're learning constantly. And you know, me and Matt are starting to travel. You open up 4 offices, and like you have to travel, and how does that impact culture when you're away from the office? And you know, what cultural pillars are you building up within each office? Are you sending people from the OG office to the new offices? Yeah, these are all things, and because we really value our culture, so we think a lot about how that scales as well as how the business scales. I think we equal amounts of energy go into both. And we're making an equal number of mistakes on both sides, and so yeah. And then the second part of your question, like how you know when it's the right time to go overseas. I think we're lucky that we get pulled into new markets by existing customers. So you know, amazing brand like Bondi Sands. You know, we go into
mm,
Australia. They're there. We start tracking in Australia, and then they sort of say, "Hey, we're you know in the UK and US as well. Can you track us overseas?" And so then all of a sudden you have this like soft landing of 5 or 10 or 15 of your existing customers who want you to track and launch your product in a new market. So that's really nice as like a kind of bridge to get in. You have some case studies already in that market, and then we treat it, I guess Matt and I had this like bootstrap mentality for the first year. It was all just word of mouth. We track conversations per week and see how that translates into revenue. And so we don't market in new geos until product market fit is like locked in, until we know that the same demand exists as what existed in New Zealand. And so for the US and UK, we've basically like gone in with those early customers. We've let word of mouth do its thing. We've done a few kind of recce trips, me and Matt, over to do a few demos. And then if you get to like a significant number of local clients in 12 months, then we feel comfortable investing marketing spend and investing in building a team and committing to that market. So we're sort of on this precipice now where we feel comfortable about the US and UK product market fit. Few product changes to tinker with, but overall it's pretty similar. And so we're about to kind of embark on launching into those markets. So yeah, it's exciting. But I guess we're relatively like, we grew up during COVID, and then it's been like a downturn basically ever since COVID. So we have this like conservative way of spending the money that we raise, and so that's kind of proliferating, continuing on in how we launch new markets.
And we've just had a really great question come through. Basically, how much does where you come from, i.e. from way down under? I like to say, a country of 5 million people and 50 million sheep. How does that influence kind of what, how you go about approaching new markets, right? Are you using your Kiwiness, or are you really focusing on how you be relevant and kind of recognized and build the reputation locally in each new market?
Yeah, an advisor of ours sort of, gave us some really good feedback that it's a bit of both. You can stand out by bringing your existing culture in, but you also need to, like, each office should have its own version of that culture that is representative of the local flavor as well. I'm probably almost a bad person to ask, because I was born in the States, hence the twang, and lived there till I was like 12, and then came to New Zealand. So I probably lean on different parts of my upbringing at different times. And there's like things you learn straight away, like the self-deprecating Kiwi mentality doesn't really get you anywhere over there. Like, people don't find it funny, but they also they like believe what you say. So you're like, we're this little tiny startup out of New Zealand, just finding our way in the big city, and they're like, oh, sounds kind of lame. I'll go over here.
Yeah. Come back and talk to us when you've got your shit sorted, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So you got to like kind of give that like, spin where you're like, these are our clients, this is what we're doing. It's, pretty exciting. And that's a slightly different way of talking, particularly, in a leadership-y type role. If you're trying to, hire great talent, you're trying to impress potential partners, you sort of have to change how you go about explaining who we are, what success we've had. Otherwise you kind of just get looked over.
Yeah, I mean, as a service business and operating in similar markets to yourself, I think we find that it's our kind of internal culture that we need to try and maintain a really big focus on, because that's the thing that connects us internationally, right? The same type of people like to gather together, but how you go to market and how you present yourself externally is the stuff that really needs to, it would be hard to walk into a boardroom in New York City in a tracksuit.
I'll try.
Whereas in New Zealand, right? Yeah. Well, it's one way to stand out, but and I guess with that in mind, I'm really interested. Just coming back to your role, right? And you're a co-founder and a co-CEO. What does that mean? When you're sharing kind of that role and that, how do you and Matt work together, right? What's the good, the bad, and the ugly? Come on, open it up.
I mean, it's becoming more and more commonplace to see co-CEOs, which is,
Mm.
I guess, nice. We sort of stumbled on it just because of our relationship and how we were working together in the first 6 to 12 months of Tracksuit. So it just felt right. We're super close. We'd worked together previously, and we're both like generalists with slightly different focuses. I'm probably more ops, customer, product. He's more sales, marketing, growth. And so we just like fell into these roles early on. We were co-CEOs, and he was doing a little more selling and I was doing a little more customer work. And then we hired brilliant people who are way better at all those things than we are. And then we started kind of managing those teams. I'm not smart enough to be like a CPO or a COO of a fast growing company. So, we'll hire great people into those roles. And so you almost save those C-suite titles for people that will grow and be better than us, and we can, hold on to those CEO titles. I think the fascinating thing is, as you're growing, there are just so many. The role is big. I'm sure you feel that, and we found it's changed fairly often. We will kind of deconstruct what we're doing, what's taking up all our time, and then almost write a fresh JD every 6 months or so for each other. The thing that stood out, as we were growing, was that there was so much downward management that was necessary to run a really good team and really good culture. There's also like to get value out of our stakeholders, to maintain those relationships. There was a ton of upward management and like in the fundraising and the conversations with board. And so we actually split it that way, which has been really successful for us over the last year and a half. Matt's done a lot of the downward management. I don't have to think about the team meetings so much. He kind of runs all of that. And then I do all of the fundraising and stakeholder management and discussions. And he doesn't have to think much about that. We definitely play roles. Like I will talk about, something in the team meeting, but he's sort of like, here's your slide, here's what you got. And the board or investors will say, hey, we want to talk to Matt and talk about growth. And I'll be like, cool, Matt, we need you for this meeting. Come chat about that. So that was a really successful way of splitting it. It's going to change again shortly, which is exciting because, as we travel more, Matt's going to be more based in the Northern Hemisphere. I'm going to be more based down here. So, we're kind of rethinking that at the moment. Up there, we're going to be way more startup-y and, breaking all the rules that we're setting. And down here, we're going to be a little more scale-up-y. And so we're talking about, I'll be making the rules and Matt will be breaking the rules, which will probably be endlessly frustrating, but also great. So, I think, it's a constant evolution. It's worked really well for us. But, you have to communicate a lot. You have to leave your egos at the door. And you have to be really good friends.
Yeah, and I mean, speaking from now kind of 6.5 years of experience with Overdose, right? The bigger and the more you expand, and the more the more you introduce complexity, the more necessary it becomes to be really clear and simple in the way that you focus on what it is that you do each day. I was watching Harvey Finkelstein, who is the founder of Shopify, speak, right, and in between all of his kind of stockholder and share price conversations, he mentioned something about leadership, and he said this is an unpopular belief, but micromanagement is one of the most effective ways to manage teams and people if you're focusing on the right things, right? And from my perspective, I think leadership is really, particularly in that kind of CEO role, where you could be pulled apart in many directions, and particularly internationally, right? Like, something happens with a lawyer in the US, and there's a customer on the ground in the UK who's dealing with some PR stuff, and you've got a local team member who's got some health problems or whatever, right? Like, it's really easy to be pulled apart, but the thing that needs to pull you back is really that simple core focus, right? As long as I'm doing this all the time and it's working, everything else I can deal with. But if that's not working, nothing else matters, type thing. So look, I think we're almost at time, but I do want to ask you one kind of final question, right? Let's go back to the tracksuits and the color, right? You talk about purple, and I've seen the spread of colors. Like, do you have a tracksuit for personality, or is it like what you feel like when you wake up in the morning? Like, what's the deal with the coloring?
Me
What's the
personally,
favorite?
or
Yeah, personally.
everyone. I mean, I like the purple. Um, yeah, maybe, or the red is also pretty striking, but maybe a
I
little
think
too
the red's
aggressive.
pretty powerful.
Yeah, the red is powerful. Harry, our head of product, looks fantastic in the red. So I think he kind of owns that. I'd say like that's his. I don't want to step on his turf. I'll just take the purple. It's what I wore the first day, so I'll just roll with the purple. Um, yeah, that's it.
Amazing. And I know you're heading up north for a few months with the family. So I guess I want to wish you all the best for both the business, for your partnership with your co-founder, and for your travels as you go forth and conquer the world. And just want to say, our team, we're starting to work with you across Australia and New Zealand in particular, and we're pretty pumped with how the product's going, and we're really excited with the conversations we're having with our clients with the product as well. So, big fan. Good luck, and yeah, all the best with the travels, my friend.
Thanks, Paul. Keep lighting the way for us. We're following in your footsteps. So, yeah, appreciate your time and for the kind softball questions. Make me look good. And yeah, and looking forward to our partnership expanding over time.
Yeah, same here.